Comrade Sanders to the woodshed. Like Obama in 2008 and 2012. A lot of anti-war, anti-corporate welfare types support Bernie, who don't see through his deceptions and rhetoric. Like with Obama, a lot cleared up by looking at his voting record. Judge a man by what he does, not by what he says. Some ask, why aren't you bashing Hillary? Oh, I will. Don't worry. Her ills are transparent, and the woman laughs about killing people.
We came, we saw, he died.
Bernie needs to explain, not just because of the election. He needs to be exposed because of his backwards economic policies and his hypocrisy in foreign policy. Bernie Sanders is not a peace candidate. Barack Obama was not a peace candidate. You would have known that if you had looked at his record instead of his rhetoric. We'll start with foreign policy. Those feeling the burn are going to cling to his one vote against the second Iraq War. A lot of Democrats voted against that war. They weren't voting against the war, they were voting against George Bush. There was a divide about how we went to war, not that we went to war. The Democrats wanted it to be more multilateral. The Republicans were more for the unilateral. They had a coalition which consisted of just the UK. Bernie did not have a problem with attacking Iraq. It was a problem with George Bush. Bernie is a company man. He votes Democrat 96% of the time. And when suddenly Obama had the war, he was okay with it. When Clinton wanted a war, he was okay with it. As long as there was a D next to the guy's name, it was okay to kill. Bernie Sanders voted to finance that war while Bush was president even multiple times, even after Abu Ghraib. He also supported the war in Afghanistan and still does. Obama is for the Iran deal and so is Bernie. Yet both of them supported placing sanctions on Iran. Bernie likes sanctions. He voted to put sanctions on Libya and Iran and Iraq. Hillary Clinton criticized Bernie and pointed out his hypocrisy when she said, 2 points. 1. Senator Sanders voted in 1998 on what I think is fair to call a regime change resolution with respect to Iraq, calling for the end of Saddam Hussein's regime. He voted in favor of regime change in Libya, voted in favor of Security Council being an active participant in setting the parameters of what we would do, which of course we followed through on. Bernie voted for the Iraq Liberation Act of 1998. Some of you may remember that gruesome video of Albright when she was asked if it was worth it to kill 500,000 people, most of whom were children, and she said, I think the price is worth it.
We have heard that 500,000 children have died. I mean, that's more children than died in Hiroshima. And you know, is the price worth it?
I think this is a very hard choice, but we think the price is worth it. We think the price is worth it.
They were talking about the sanctions that had been placed on Iraq. 500,000 people had died. Remember, this video was from 1997. They had 6 more years of sanctions after that. So a lot more than 500,000 people died of starvation. Most of them were children. The Iraq Liberation Act calling for regime change was in 1998. So Bernie Sanders, knowing that the sanctions had killed hundreds of thousands of people, mostly children, wanted more sanctions. In fact, he wanted regime change. He was completely for going to war with Iraq as long as Clinton was president or Obama was president. He only voted against Bush. He voted to put sanctions on Iran and Libya. He voted to bomb Kosovo. One of his staff members resigned over it. From Kosovo to Syria, Bernie Sanders has been pro-war and pro-intervention. He's pro-Al-Qaeda in Syria. He was for the coup with the neo-Nazis in Ukraine. About Ukraine and Russia, he stated, let's be clear, Russia's aggressive actions in Crimea and in Ukraine have brought about a situation where President Obama and NATO, correctly I believe, are saying, you know what, we're going to have to beef up our troop level in that part of the world and tell Putin that his aggressiveness is not going to go unmatched, that he is not going to get away with his aggressive action. Notice how many times he says aggressive. I happen to believe that Putin is doing what he is doing because his economy is increasingly in shambles and he's trying to rally people in support of him. The bottom line is the president is right. We have to put more money. We have to work with NATO to protect Eastern Europe against any kind of Russian aggression. Russian aggression, and they gave $1 billion to the coup in Kiev. And it was a coup. Victoria Nuland's on tape talking about who they're going to install in power. Yats was installed. They did not vote for him. And Russia did not invade Crimea. Crimea left through peaceful referendum. Those people voted to join Russia. They went back to Russia. Crimea was originally Russian. The people who live there speak Russian. Not a shot was fired. Not a single bullet. No one died. That's not an invasion. An invasion is what the U.S. is doing in Afghanistan, which Bernie supports, even after they bomb hospitals. An invasion is what Israel does routinely to Gaza, which Bernie also supports. In town hall meeting where people brought it up to him, this is while Gaza Strip was being bombed back into the Stone Age, kids being shelled on the beach, pediatric hospitals blown apart, UN centers, you name it, and Bernie tells him to shut up. This is the one time you'll see this guy get animated. You can listen to him promote the state line, Hamas is firing missiles, they're coming from residential areas. Because Israel's bombing kids in their bedrooms, I don't think any missile launchers were from there. It's disingenuous BS. If Israel cared about civilians, then why would they have a food blockade and routinely murder them daily and demolish houses and burn babies and everything else? They don't care about civilians. And the majority of the tunnels went to Egypt, not to Israel. And it was for trade, trying to get around the blockade. They're not offensive tunnels digging underneath Israel ready to pop out and kill people. Only 3 Israelis died, and that's because a lot of them went out to the beach to watch the actual missiles hitting Gaza. It was rockets that were fired back, not missiles. They don't have warheads. They don't have propulsion systems. It's more like a potato gun. And those people got hit by shrapnel. Thousands of Gazans were killed. And this is cyclical. But he doesn't give a damn.
You have a situation where Hamas is sending missiles into Israel. Okay. And you know where some of those missiles are coming from? They're coming from populated areas. That's a fact. Hamas has used money that came into Gaza for construction purposes, and God knows they need roads and all the things that they need, and used some of that money to build these very sophisticated tunnels into Israel for military purposes.
For survival purposes.
Okay, one second.
Yes,
no, I don't want to be interrupted. The question was asked. It's a fair question, and I'm trying to.
Okay, you have the right to resist.
If you don't,
yes, they did.
You don't. Excuse me. Shut up. You don't have the microphone.
The man's yelling because he doesn't have a microphone, but he simply said, "Don't occupied populations have the right to resist?" Because they do. Of course, Bernie ignores that, tells them to shut up, acts like it. They've been fighting for so long. Do you have a magical solution? I don't think so, blah, blah, blah. Yeah, it's called end the occupation. Most people fight you when you occupy their country and steal their resources and murder their families. He's completely a Zionist shill, to be fair. So is Hillary. Basically, all of them are. But they don't try and front this facade that they're peace candidates. Bernie does, and Bernie isn't. Bernie Sanders supports the moderate rebels in Syria, actively giving aid to al-Qaeda. He called Bashar al-Assad the evil dictator. He holds on that point. He's not changing at all from Obama. Assad's a dictator and has to go. We're going to finance ISIS and al-Nusra covertly by giving to the FSA and moderate rebels. And Bernie's pro-drone strike. Everybody got on Obama's case when he's killing Americans with drones and has a kill list, and how cowardly it is, and how dastardly the policy is because they end up killing more civilians than they do terrorists. They do double taps where they go and hit the paramedics. They're causing terrorism more than they're preventing terrorism. But Bernie loves the drone programs. He's an imperialist. Bernie Sanders has supported U.S. intervention in Somalia, Haiti, Bosnia, Liberia, Zaire, the Congo, Albania, Sudan, Afghanistan, Yugoslavia, Libya, Syria, and Iraq. And he currently supports Saudi Arabia bombing Yemen. And he has the most ridiculous policy for ISIS where he thinks they can get the Saudis to help fight ISIS by putting boots in the ground. There's a pretext for you. The Saudis fund ISIS. Now either he's completely clueless or he just couldn't think of anything else to say.
So there's a unwillingness to recognize that the biggest part of this big problem the United States is now facing in Iraq and Syria is being driven by Saudi Arabia and Qatar and Turkey. These are U.S. allies, supposedly close U.S. allies in the region. So what Sanders has been, his sort of talking point when it gets to this issue is, well, we need to get the Saudis and the Qataris to put skin in the game, as he said during the last debate, or get their hands dirty. Well, the point is that they've gotten their hands very dirty, and there's lots of skin in the game. But it's really on the side of supporting what you might call their paramilitary. And their paramilitary forces are al-Qaeda, to some extent the Islamic State, And groups like Arar al-Sham, which is fights hand in glove with al-Qaeda in Syria, and has received TOW missiles and other sophisticated American hardware to carry out attacks against the Syrian army, working side by side with al-Qaeda. So what you really have is this Sanders sort of playing a kind of a clever talking point. The rich guys in the region ought to do more, but what they're doing is not helping to fight ISIS or helping to fight al-Qaeda. It's been on the other side. They've actually been helping those extremist groups.
But Saudi Arabia is using the F-35 in their campaign against Yemen. And Bernie Sanders has voted for all the corporate welfare for the F-22 and the F-35, neither one of which work. Hear from Mr. Sanders.
When I was a kid, I always admired the Sheriff of Nottingham. That dirty Robin Hood would always take money away from the lawful government of Prince John and give it back to the people it was taken from. What, was he a libertarian or something? Doesn't he know the government is better at redistributing the wealth? That's why I like the Sheriff of Nottingham. He collected taxes for the state. The state knows best how to spend the money. Like me, I helped collect $1.5 trillion in taxes for the F-35, a fighter jet that doesn't even work. But you know me, if you don't work, I want to give you money. Another plus is that the F-35 was jointly built with Israel. You see, we're generous enough to make our corporate welfare international. But I say this to you, Ryan Dawson, if killing kids in Palestine and Yemen and wasting lots of money was good enough for Obama, who was elected twice, then why not for me? I want to waste even more money increasing Obama's taxes and continue the welfare for warfare state. College kids will look past it because I can promise magical free stuff.
The F-35, which was jointly built with the racial apartheid state Israel, costs $1.5 trillion. This is significant, as that corporate welfare alone accounts for 8.3% of the $18 trillion national debt. For Bernie's pontificating indignation about the 1% and Wall Street and corporate lobbies having too much influence, this is the epitome of hypocrisy. This is the most bloated military pork in the history of the world. This plane has cost more than a war. The best part is, and this is such a shining example of government efficiency, the $1.5 trillion and counting war toy of Lockheed welfare queen Martin doesn't even work. Let me tell you just how bad this piece of junk is.
The F-35 shows how wasteful our system has become. No one knows the exact cost, but it's vastly more than originally estimated. F-35 has become the most flagrant example of military contracting failure, off the ground much of the time. Supposed to save money by performing different functions for 3 military branches. Stealthy version for the air-propelled plane straight upwards like a helicopter for the Marines, landing gear for Navy carrier decks. Trying to do everything, turns out the F-35 can't do any of them well. The airplane sometimes can't fly in clouds, stormy weather, or at night. Engines have blown up during takeoff, and early models had developed cracks throughout their structure. Deadlines have been pushed back, contracting scandals have rocked the Pentagon, costs have doubled, and there's no end in sight. So why does the Air Force want to throw away its trusty warthogs for the F-35s that barely work? Officials claim the A-10 is just too old, but it seems the real problem is that it already exists. There are no new military contracts to hand out. The F-35, on the other hand, is being produced by over 1,200 suppliers across 45 states and 9 partner countries. The U.S. plans to buy a sizable fleet that's estimated to cost $1.5 trillion, the same cost as the entire Iraq War. A former CEO of Lockheed Martin once predicted that in the year 2054, the entire defense budget will purchase just one aircraft. It seems like we're on track.
The F-22, which Bernie also has supported all the way, is just as useless. For more details, get my book, or The Separation of Business and State. Lockheed is who issued the seed money for the Weekly Standard, the media wing of PNAC, who echoed all of the Office of Special Plans lies, which led to the Second War in Iraq, which also cost us in the trillions of dollars. Yet they are the top recipient of defense/offense spending every year, followed by Boeing. Will Sanders change that? No, because he's supported the military-industrial complex welfare for warfare state his entire career. But, he'll stand up to Wall Street and the banks, man. No, he will not. In fact, it was Bernie who gutted the Audit the Fed bill. Ron Paul, who has opposed all of the terrible things I have brought up in this video, explains.
I'm not a bit surprised that the Federal Reserve got to the Senate. I had expected Bernie Sanders to offer 604, which was the same as 1207, which is Audit the Fed bill. And at the last minute, he switched it and watered it down. And really, it adds nothing. It's a possibility that it even makes the current conditions worse.
Bernie is a warmonger. He parrots the official line on Syria, Palestine, Ukraine, and Libya. He helps the military-industrial complex that is costing trillions. And instead of stopping or cutting any of that, he wants to increase taxes. And he tries to hoodwink the youth with these charlatan promises of, oh, it won't be you, it'll just be rich people who get affected. That's a bold-faced lie. The two main Kool-Aid brands he's selling are free college and free healthcare, paid for with a huge payroll tax and a small tax on speculation. There's so much wrong with this that it's hard to know where to start. Talking to Democrats about economics is like explaining chemistry to 5-year-olds. But we can do this. Let's talk about education. Instead of addressing the underlying cause of why college is so expensive, Bernie just looks at ways to make new taxes to pay for it. Obama's payroll taxes hurt small businesses and workers, but Bernie thinks increasing that tax won't hurt because doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results is perfectly sane when insane. Colleges were not always so expensive. Something happened. Peter Schiff, the CEO of Euro-Pacific Capital, who correctly predicted the housing bubble, explained.
Why is watering down the college degrees and rising cost of college loans so expensive to go to college nowadays?
America's youth are in a lot of trouble if they stay here. See, fortunately, they can leave. They have an escape valve. And more Americans, and unfortunately, the brightest, the most ambitious, are the ones that are going to leave because they're going to be able to read the writing on the wall and they're going to seek out their fame and fortune and their freedom abroad. All 4 of my grandparents immigrated to America looking for freedom. And the younger generations are now going to leave for the exact same reason. They're going to look for the same freedoms abroad that my grandparents found here. But your question about why college is so expensive is because the government subsidizes it. Anything the government subsidizes is going to be overpriced, whether it's education, healthcare, housing. The government provides an enormous stimulus support to education, which is guaranteed student loans and now direct government financed student loans, where the students take the money and go bid up college prices. The universities know that college students are going to pay whatever price they ask because the money's coming from the government.
It's a lot worse than that. Government is not doing this simply out of incompetence. They profit from it. The Department of Profiteering through Exploitation, the Department of Education, has made hundreds of billions of dollars from student loans. Yet the followers of Bernie defend the Department of Education like some Stockholm Syndrome acolytes. Shaheen Nazarpour explains.
The U.S. Department of Education is poised to make $127 billion, that's billion with a B, over the next decade from lending money to college students and their families over the next 10 years. That's according to the latest numbers from the Congressional Budget Office. If the number alone doesn't make you take notice, well, the reasons behind it should. Here to tell us more is Shaheen Nazarpour. Shaheen, I just have to say, wow, those numbers are stunning to me. Break it down. How is the Department of Education profiting from student loans?
It's simple. The U.S. government borrows cheaply in the markets just because the U.S. government's safest credit out there. So they borrow cheaply and they lend to students at a much higher rate. So that spread is pure profit. And $127 billion over the next decade, or an average of $12 billion a year.
This is all due to a new student loan law basing interest rates on the government's cost to borrow. Surely they knew that there was potential here for creating a bigger debt burden for the borrowers.
I used a story from the liberal Huffington Post, too, and of course, it's not accurate. If you take the time to analyze it, the Congressional Budget Office's numbers are way too low. $127 billion will not take a decade. It won't even take 3 years. And all you have to do is look at the previous years, where the profits are in the 40 to 50 billion range. After ExxonMobil and Apple, the most profitable corporation was the Department of Education. Get rid of the Department of Education. They are merely profiteers with an educational theme. Millennials freak out about this as if the Department of Ed causes education. Naming something, the Patriot Act, doesn't make it patriotic. I point out the uselessness of the Department of Homeland Security and the TSA, and they agree because those were created in their lifetime. So they understand that not all was chaos before these departments were created. Well, anyone 36 or older did not have a Department of Education when they were born either, and yet the nation still had schools with no Department of Education. People are under the impression that tuition money goes to pay for teacher salaries. Listen, universities are investment vehicles into large private companies, including jails and war industries. The student loan system is a method of increasing investment capital of universities as a way of laundering essentially a government subsidy through schools into stocks. Have a look at some of the divestment campaigns. Schools are putting tens of millions of dollars into industries involved in apartheid. Columbia became the first university to divest from prisons. Colleges are businesses with an educational theme. If you want affordable college, tackle the reasons why they cost so much, rather than shifting the burden around from one group to another via taxes. We don't need a payroll tax. Stop guaranteed student loans. The payroll tax will hurt college graduates as well. The amount of government waste in all departments is staggering. It would take a long time to go over them all. That's why I wrote a book about it. The American healthcare system is the worst in the entire first world. People were very excited. Oh, they want to change. And a lot of people ran and supported Obamacare because healthcare was terrible, had to change it to something, and yet it wasn't a step forward. It wasn't even a step sideways. It was a step backwards. Because again, no one looked at why it cost so much. Bernie looks at how to pay for it and not how to make it cost less. His numbers aren't even close to making enough to cover it either. Bernie would need trillions in tax increases. 19 trillion is the estimate so far. It doesn't matter what all ratio of the payment is made by the government or by employers or out of pocket if the price is extremely high. So why are the prices so high? It's a combination of pharmaceutical and insurance companies getting mercantilistic protectionist regulation from government, patent abuse, consumer negligence, and bad law. To unravel all of these complexities, I highly recommend that you listen to Dr. Philip Caper. Stop the confirmation bias and stop assigning what you want to see to Bernie Sanders. The man has helped starve children and start wars. Expanding government power is not a solution. Bernie is and has been pro-war and pro-corporate welfare his whole career. Taxing more people to prop up overpriced industries in education and health fixes nothing. It's still corporate welfare, only now it's increased and there's less money in the economy. You cannot be so basic that because a word is in the title, like education or environment or something that you stand for, do not be so naive to think that they have those interests at heart. When you look at it and look at what they're doing and what they've done, not what you wish they were doing, and you figure out that they're not helping the environment or education or commerce or any of these departments, the Department of Interior, the Department of Homeland Security, they are all useless. It is just bloated government bureaucracy that wastes your money. And the most baffling thing of all is that Bernie supporters can't stand Hillary Clinton when the two of them voted together 93% of the time. Bernie Sanders is another third term of Barack Obama with even higher taxes. And Obama was basically a third and fourth term of George Bush. Stop being basic.
I want everyone off of this stage, or else I'm going to call all of your parents. I don't care if they're dead.